gonna lay down my burden down by the riverside, down by the riverside, down by the riverside. I'm gonna lay down my burden down by the riverside. I'm gonna study, oh no more. Well, I ain't gonna study for no more. Ain't gonna study for no more. Ain't gonna study for no more. Well, I ain't gonna study for no more.
Hey guys, welcome back to the Audio Wizard. I'm Chris Wilson. Today we're going to be talking about what all goes into the production of the $1 Million Quartet, what I'm using here at my front of house station, and a little bit about how I'm mixing the show. So let's get to it. Let's talk a little bit about how I have this system designed. So within the show, I do a lot of panning, I do a lot of tracking. Sam Phillips walks side to side. He does a lot of pacing within the show. And so I want his vocal image to pace across the room as well. Now, that gets really tricky because this is a curved continental room, right? There's no middle aisle. The aisles are side to side. And the array itself, I've got a hang of 7 QSC wide line up here. I've got a hang of 7 QSC wide line hanging here. And then I have a hang of QSC wide line and the subs up top right here. We're up in the ceiling at the University of Virginia, the Culbreth Theater, and we're looking at a sub configuration that my buddy Ren here has put together for the theater. This is Ren Curtis, and he's going to talk a little bit more about why they went with this sub configuration for the room.
Hello, I'm Ren. So we have 3 powered boxes hanging vertically, and the middle one is turned backwards. It's a fairly standard subwoofer configuration, cardioid configuration.
So what led you to put your subwoofers in the ceiling in the first place?
In a few words, the inverse square law.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So if the subwoofers are on the ground, they're going to be much they're going to be much closer to the front, portion of the audience versus the rear portion of the audience, and so they'll be much louder in the front than the back. And if you fly them higher, then the relative distance between the subwoofers in the front row and the subwoofers in the back row is less.
Right.
That ratio is different. So in a lot of ways, having them on the ground is better in terms of there's less reflections and things that you're dealing with immediately in front of the audience.
Yeah.
But as far as the general amplitude front to back goes, it's better to fly them if that's what you're going for. As you know, it's checks and balances.
Oh, absolutely.
Deciding which what sacrifices you're willing to make for what gains.
Right.
So for the purposes of amplitude, I decided to fly them, and I decided to fly one single cluster in the center.
Okay.
And that was because if you have two different sets of subs, a stereo pair, one on each side for your main left and right, you're going to have a lot of
summation, right?
Right, exactly.
Power alley, if you will.
Yes, power alley, lobes and peaks and valleys and all that whatnot. And if you only have one array, you only have one source. There's no interaction between 2 different sources. The only interaction you're getting is the interaction with the room, with reflections.
Yeah.
There's nothing you can do about that. The disadvantage there is that time aligning the subwoofers to the main left and right is going to be different depending on where you are in the room. There's going to be a greater difference in relative distance. But because they're both flown, that's actually not a huge relative difference, compared to as it would be if they were all on the ground.
Yep.
So,
there's a lot of pros to this design, sort of saying. Yeah.
There's a lot of pros to it.
The seesaw effect was way heavier on the pro side. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Okay.
But there are definitely not having the subwoofers so far away from the main left and right is not ideal.
Right.
For sure.
Yeah.
But for the purposes of what I was trying to do, I think it worked better.
More
than
even amplitude across the theater. Yeah.
And you've heard the theater. What do you think of that?
I think it's actually really, really well done. The theater has a good rake to it, and so the coverage between the front and the back isn't maybe a 5 dB difference, from front to back. It's not bad. And then what I was really impressed with whenever I first got in here and started running some noise through the subs, the bottom lobe of the cardioid array actually tanks right on the forward side of the thrust, right at row 1, and so you have nothing on the deck at all, man. It's really impressive. There's nothing on stage, but the lobe hits perfect for row 1 and goes all the way to the back wall. Did you put that in a model and then design that?
I did.
And then put a lot of eyeballs to it to look down?
Yes.
Okay.
I put it all together in ease, and or ease focus rather, and the specific model of subs that I chose, that exact model was not in ease, but there were some that were close enough.
To make sure that your system is properly designed and in the correct time. If you don't have it correctly tuned and correctly timed, that image will fall apart as you're panning it across the house. You want it to be true and consistent as it passes by your face. If it's not, then you're going to be lost. Your brain is going to take you out of the moment and say, what was that? Instead of, oh, that was a great delivered line. That's a what just happened. And we don't want the what just happened, right? In the ceiling for the center, I don't have it set up coming off the console as a mono or a center. I actually have the system ran into my lake as a left and right source. So on the lake, I have A, B, C, D, all the outputs split up, and I changed their crossovers so I could have independent control of the outputs. So technically I'm sending left, right, center, sub, front fill, delay, and program out of the lake. Here you see I have a group for tops, I have a group for everybody, and then I have a group for fills. Speaking of fills, the fills that we have down there, we have one left, one center, and one right. And they're directly splitting right to the outside of this group of chairs, right to the outside of that group of chairs. And so when you're physically down here in this corner, from here, you're still getting the array, but by the time you hit row 5, because I have the array timed back to the arrival of the fills, it's not very far off. You can kind of see that, but definitely as I average the room around, because it is a half round room here, that average has to be taken into consideration, because the array itself now timed correctly with the center pushed back a tad, and then the whole array timed to the sub array that's hanging right about there. We saw that in a video earlier. Whenever you get down here to row 3 and 4, you come out of the array itself, and now you're focusing to this little EAW sitting here on the stage. Now from here, whenever I pan hard left, these are still set up in a collapsed to mono, kind of like our center array. And so what that does for us is it still draws your attention this direction, because from this seat it is far right. So we're running Wave Sound Grid on 12 inputs here. We've got all of the lavalier mics coming into a C6 that works on a little bit of inflection compression, and then we have the Evo channel that brings it into a group. You set a phase group, and it tries to align everybody within that group to the same time and phase. So whenever they actually start speaking face to face, it's supposed to alleviate any couple canceling that we're receiving through the desk. It's done a pretty great job so far. I've used it a little bit as an EQ here and there as well. Like for Sam's vocal here, Sam's vocal gets a little bit 1500 heavy, you know, and a little bit around 800 there. And then, you know, I'm also using a little bit of the C6 on Sam's vocal as well, using the bottom end as an EQ and compression in the upper mid band here to alleviate any low end pushes whenever it gets closer to, you know, mics and or closer to drums and stuff like that. And you saw me, you know, click out of the red here. It shows up red for impulses for like snare drum and stuff like that whenever it gets up closer to those kind of things. So that's what we're doing on the sound grid in the multi-rack here. That's being ran from a Mac Mini over here at front of house. Let's see, this Mac Mini here, that's also running the Electrosonics stuff in this window. Directly on my left over here we have the QLab, and QLab does automatic fade times, it does automatic goes, scene selections. There's a lot of different things this guy can do. We've got it set up to where it actually runs a 20-minute list of songs out into the foyer before the doors open, and then a 30-minute door. And then once it runs that, it's actually firing chimes and announcements into the lobby to have people move this direction. And then we go into the pre-show announcement that's basically, you know, hey, welcome to the $1 Million Quartet, enjoy it, have a great time, yada yada. And then we get into my sound design here. There's a point in the show where they step outside, and in the outside shot we actually have a really nice ambient track that runs. It's kind of crickets chirping, a little bit of outside rustling like a can down the street, and there's a dog back in the back corner. There's a car that runs behind the venue because we have surround sound that we've got set up here. So whenever it comes to the surround, we have these two channels here linked, then we have the channel here and a channel in the back linked, and the same thing for the other side of the room. So in QLab, I can send them different times in delay, and I could send them different amplitude signals to really throw your image around. But there is a section in the show that John and Carl walk off stage, and they actually walk through this corridor here into backstage. And then they walk through this little area, through this drape set, and they walk out right here into the alleyway, or what looks like the alleyway, trash can, you know, the wall, the stuff here, the Marlboro Man on the wall. We got, you know, Elvis and Johnny Cash and really cool newspaper articles and stuff. But, you know, there's a scene where they're out here smoking some cigarettes and they're having a conversation. And so that ambient track starts, and it puts you in a different state of mind, like you're actually outside. Here we have Wave Tool 2. Wave Tool 2 is a product of Finland. They're doing something great here. So this displays any of the inputs that I would like it to, but this displays inputs pulling from the head amp off of into Dante land off the CL5. So everything in green would actually be the impulse in history going across each individual channel. Here you see Jerry, Carl, Elvis, John, Fluke. These are all the actors. You see a couple of their pictures here. You can also see these ones in blue say low RF. That means that their packs aren't on. You might ask, well, how does it know? So over this line that I have here, my network line's going into a switch, and within that switch, not only is it hitting the Rio systems for the Dante input into WaveTool, but it's also hitting Shure Wireless Workbench 6 and hitting all of the ULXDs that we have under here. And so over the network, I can pull the control command from the Shure network, and it will display the RF in orange across this box. So in real time, I can not only watch each RF signal of all of my Shure packs, but I can see the green impulse of all of my inputs as well in a histograph, so I can see what kind of information we're getting here. Not only does it do this, but at the bottom it says streaming off down here. What I've done is I've set up the hard connection for the data for the server, and in this situation, this Mac becomes a server over a wireless network that I've got connected in the building. So from here you can see all of these inputs. Right up here you can say hit start, it'll say streaming, and right down here it says that it's on my Mac, it says that it's streaming to a IP address, which is actually this iPad on this network. And so what that does for us, as it's buffering here at the top, that not only shows us exactly the same signal path that we have here on my server, it displays that for him backstage, and you can actually tap on one of these artist blocks and it'll feed about a 4 millisecond delay of that signal right off the head amp. So that's before anything I'm doing to it. It picks it right off the head amp and sends it right into this server down the network line, and then the server is broadcasting over Wi-Fi blanket to the iPad, and the iPad hangs out backstage, side stage. So at any point during the show, let's say Elvis's microphone goes down, I can reach up here to my chat list, right, on my screen, and right over here I have some hotkeys. So let's say check Elvis mic is F5. As soon as I click F5 on my screen, it shows check Elvis head mic. And then on his screen, a little pop-up window came over, and you just come over here and in that chat window it says check Elvis head mic. Let's come up here and type something. Let's say okay, right? And then hit return. And that just flashed my screen over here in red, right? That means it popped up in my chat window. You can have multiple of these set up at a time, right? So I have this iPad for my A2 backstage. My stage manager upstairs is running it on an iPhone while she's calling show. So if there's any point on comm that I get on there and say, hey man, I've lost this or I've lost that, he can instantly see what I'm talking about and try to get it fixed backstage without having a conversation with me.
Thank you so much for visiting the Audio Wizard. Go ahead and hit the little notification bell so you know whenever I release Vlog 3, Mixing the $1 Million Quartet at UVA.
Remember guys, what we do here is not about magic, it's all science. It's frequency, vibration, and time. I'll see you soon.